So her PR was like, okay, so yeah, she's gonna come down, and if she doesn't like the clothes, she's just gonna kind of uh, just gonna say like, thank you so much, and go back upstairs, and you kind of just pack up your stuff and leave.
Our guest today is Caroline Tompkins. She's a photographer based in Brooklyn, New York, and we're going to talk about where she gets her inspiration, why she follows the path of fear, danger, and sexuality in some of her photography, the book that she just launched last year, signing to Giant Artists, which is massive, which just happened last December, and just anything in between about film and her process. Caroline, welcome.
Hey, happy to be here.
Cool. I think one of the things I'd love to start on with you is just the way that you find new projects. I think I read a little bit about some of the ways you've found projects in the past. One of the things that really got me interested was this article back, I think it was in 2017 in Metal Magazine. You talked about going to Ohio and like renting a booth at a flea market to do a photo studio. I thought that was
Mm,
super cool. Like not many people think that way. So how do
mm,
you go about finding these different ways of creating photographs?
totally. I think that I am often trying to be really sensitive to what I'm bothered by or what I'm thinking about a lot, what I can't stop talking about at a party, what is kind of keeping me up at night, and that kind of runs the gamut of, you know, bad relationships or Ohio tourism in Ohio. I think being homesick, I think was, I'm from Ohio, so I think that that was a big driver of trying to kind of have this complicated relationship with where you grew up, and how do you go back once you're not really from there anymore. So I think for me, yeah, I really try to, yeah, just be sensitive to those things. And I think anytime, I think photography has this beautiful way of, you just have to make the photos, and then you kind of figure out what they were about later. Um, but I also feel like having a good sense of, yeah, what are you scared of? What are you uncomfortable about? What are you excited about? What can't you stop sort of mind grinding about? And I think that's kind of where project ideas lie.
Yeah, I think one of the things you also pointed out too is you sometimes create towards your fears, which I think is really cool because a lot of people are after like what's the hype right now and what's cool and like what is everybody else creating, and you're like, I'm going to create the thing that scares me. And like, why is that, do you think?
I think there's like a purity in the thought there. Like, I know that if, when I am uh, being sort of moved by hype or something, that it's not going to come out. It's going to feel a bit empty, I think, when I'm being driven by the, I don't know, being driven by like what someone else is going to think of it, I guess.
Right.
And so I think when I'm uncomfortable or afraid, it feels like a pure emotion, and it feels right to be like, okay, there's something there. I really should kind of step further into that, because um, it's almost exciting to be like, ooh, that's scary.
Yeah.
Because then you kind
Yeah.
of know that's where you should be going.
Yeah, it makes you think differently. And I think it's a way of creating in a space that others are not looking towards. And I think that also opens up new avenues, you know? Like I've found that in some of the stuff that I like to create is you have, like you said, you have these thoughts and you're like, I'm just gonna go for it, even if nobody really wants to see this at the moment. and then it might develop something else like later down the road. Like the flea market thing still, like to me, when I read that, I was like, this is such a like great idea to have a photo booth at a flea market. Like it just got my mind going too. I was like, oh man, you could set up like a video booth at some of these things, get people's stories. Cause some of the best like stories and meeting people come from these things that people aren't looking at, like a flea market. Like I'm sure you
Mhm.
got some great portraits of people.
Totally. And just, I think every photographer or some, you know, especially photography, like you have this fear of the approach to somebody. And so I think even fears like that of the general social anxiety of going up to a stranger and kind of finding ways where that is a bit easier. If you're setting up an opportunity for other people to come to you, um, it obviously helps.
See,
Yeah,
I
and
feel
has
like
it
you got to have some good people skills because I'm an introvert, so I won't be going up to people asking, "Hey, can I take your photo?" Or even, when I have to take photos of like some clients, it's like I don't know how to pose them. I don't know how to, position them so they look good, and I definitely don't know how to express it to them to tell them, be like, "Hey, stand this way, do this." But yeah,
But maybe that's why you should do it even
exactly.
right,
more,
right, push it more.
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
have that sort of anxiety. So it's like, I feel like you gotta run into the fire.
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
I do wildlife photography, so I don't need to talk to the people. So
Yeah, fair enough. That works too.
yeah.
Yeah, have you seen that this like impromptu photographing people, approaching people has like really helped develop your client work too, and like the way that you interact with your clients and some of the bigger jobs that you've done?
Yeah, I think it's part of the like hazing process of becoming a professional photographer is like you just have to be able to talk to anybody and connect with anyone and make anyone trust you. And so and get a lot of rejection. I did a I did a project a few weeks ago in Brighton Beach where I like had to photograph people at Brighton Beach, but also get them to sign like model releases. And I think I got like 1,000 no's or so. It felt, at
Oh
least it
Wow.
wow.
felt like that. I mean, I'm sure I got like 15 or something and was like, I like fully called my boyfriend being like, I can't do this. Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? And so it's just, even I still experience so much of that rejection and it still feels bad. It never feels like great, but you kind of, again, just sort of run into that fire and it feels a little less bad.
Yeah, I think that's part of this whole creative space, though. It's like you have to be able to take the criticism, the downturns, and you have to just like make it into something. So I'm sure I mean, I've seen that in my field with filming too. It's like you pitch a project, you're super excited about it, and then they're like, no. Or you do approach some people, you're like, this is going to be great. All they have to do is say yes to this like interview, and then they're like, no, I don't want to do it. And you're like, now the project is lost. But you have to then do the next thing and like step into it. What do you find is your like way to get around some of that stuff? Like if you do have a lot of downturns or like people saying no, is there something that you look to in your process to like get yourself excited again about the project?
I think that no sometimes just needs a little bit more explanation. I think if I'm really excited about something, I find this with like celebrity work, they're so primed. I feel like they're so interested in saying no, and no is
Right.
such a is something they're looking to say often. So
They know
I
they
feel
can say that. They're like, we know we can say no because we do it all
totally,
the time.
yeah. And I feel like sometimes with celebrity work, I'm trying to get no's, so I kind of know where those limits are.
Okay.
Uh, but I think that sometimes it just takes a little bit more like references of, I often will bring like image references or painting references or have an explanation of my thought process. So it's not just kind of random, like, go jump on that tree. And maybe it's in a larger context or sort of a story I'm trying to tell. And I think that, when people feel like they're being thought of and when there's like sort of intentionality, I feel like it's a lot easier to kind of move into that yes zone. Otherwise, I think just like living like a goldfish and just moving on and never remembering anything that happened in the past is good.
Yeah, that's true. And with celebrities, do you try and like dig into something personally with them? Like, are you like, okay, they really seem to like this style of art or this type of thing, so I'm going to try and talk more about that so that I can get them interested in what we're trying to do here. Is there like a personal connection you try and tap into?
Sometimes it's so, celebrity is such a strange world because sometimes you get 30 seconds with someone, and it's like I'm not going to spend 25 of those seconds talking about their childhood
Right.
home, and I'm just in like, all right, go stand over there, let's do this,
I
or
feel like
go,
that's something you learn though.
yeah,
Like because if you do it a couple of times, you're like, oh shoot, like they really only had 30 seconds when they said they only had 30 seconds. Like I got to get the shot.
totally, totally. But, and then other times there's a stylist and they've allotted 10 hours and you're creating so many mood boards, and you can kind of think about what would be interesting, or maybe there's a character they're playing, or, I find especially with actors or something, I feel like they want to be working with a director that has an idea of how this like shoot is playing into some story or something. But yeah, so I've also had actors where I've like brought a bunch of props and I do have all that time and there is a stylist and they're like, no, 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 no. They're like, no, I'll sit over there. That's it. Um,
Yeah, they don't always go with the plan. I've found that too. I haven't worked with a ton of celebrities, but they're just like, this is their allotted time. They're here because they have to be sometimes, and they're like, yeah, I got to do this cover or whatever it is. And do you have any like fun celebrity stories from any of your shoots where you're like, this was such a fun shoot and it turned out to be better than you like thought the experience would be?
yeah, I have a few. Do you think I should pick like one, two?
You can tell all the
Yeah.
stories you want. It's up to you.
Let's think. I mean, I feel like it's, I guess, yeah, well, maybe we'll start with like Paris Hilton. It, I photographed her a few times, but the first was for a small like fashion German magazine called King Kong. So I feel like for her the stakes were pretty low. For me, they were quite high. I had flown to, it was like obviously unpaid fashion kind of thing. So I flew to LA for it. I hired like a few assistants. I think I paid for my like stylist flight or something like that. And so, I had a big like money investment into this, and her PR, I'd only obviously, you only ever speak to the celebrities' PR, you don't speak to them usually, but they, um, I get into it was shooting at her house too, which again, it felt like for her just it felt like for her it was like, let's just play dress up in my
Yeah,
house
just hang
today.
out.
Yeah,
Come
and
photograph me.
yeah, and for me, I'm like crunching the numbers. And yeah, so we like started setting up the clothes. This is in like 2019. And her PR was like, "Hey, so what's gonna happen is she's gonna come downstairs like after like the glam is finished." That's another thing. Like you try to make all these glam mood boards of being like, "I want her to be whatever," and it's always like I don't know. It really depends on kind of what you get. You're gonna get what you get, but so her PR was like, okay, so yeah, she's gonna come down, and if she doesn't like the clothes, she's just gonna kind of uh, just gonna say like, thank you so much, and go back upstairs, and you kind of just pack up your stuff and leave. And
Wow.
so it
So you
was
do all of that and she could just bail.
totally, which again, it's like she has the power. Like this doesn't. It was a cover, but I get it. Like when you're Paris
Yeah.
Hilton, you don't need to care about this. And so it was just like an extreme moment of tension of her like flipping through the clothes, and I'm like, this could be it, this is it. And but yeah, luckily she seemed to like some things, and yeah, we were just kind of like hanging around her house and taking pics, and yeah, it was felt like such a surreal experience, especially because yeah, it wasn't sort of I feel like for everyone it was just like let's just try to have as much fun as possible. Um, it's not like it was for some bag that we had to sell or something.
And
Um,
you put your own money into that to try and shoot that, you said? Like you were paying for stylists and things like that?
yeah, so a lot of fashion work, especially for fashion magazines, it's the financial stake is on the photographer to pay
Wow, I didn't
for
know that.
models, or and a lot of people view it as a lot of fashion photographers view that work as their personal work. So
Right.
they feel like, okay, if I'm investing $25,000, it's like I'm investing in a personal project. It's definitely like a difficult pill to
Yeah,
swallow.
totally.
It's you kind of get that opportunity though to showcase, oh, I shot Paris Hilton here, I shot this guy here. So
Mhm.
when when another company or something hires you, you'll have kind of that portfolio to show.
Totally. And it's not
Yeah.
often celebrity work. I feel like fashion stuff is usually like working with the right models, working with the right stylists, for the right magazines. So often it's like, oh, this magazine is a huge uh, deal to me. So if I say I work for them, it kind of opens up a world of advertising work that gets seen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like your
Yeah.
portfolio out there in the world for people to see.
Hmm.
I just never knew that that was the thing. Like you as the photographer, I mean, the magazine, I guess, gets the like winning side of it too. Like where they're like, hey, you go pay for this shoot and then we're going to publish it. And I guess it's like, it is a win-win though, because like you said, if you have it all laid out and you're like, this is going to be really big for me, it makes sense because otherwise, how are you going to get into that world?
Totally. I feel like it's all about risk assessment. And yeah, I've done editorials that I've paid for and been like, I'm never going to show these photos. And it's like, what do you do then?
Yeah.
So,
Have there been like
yeah.
nightmare projects where you're like, okay, this is going to be great. And then you get it all set up and then it doesn't work out the way you did and you took the risk and it didn't work out? Is there something that sticks in your mind
Um,
that you would like to revisit? You're
yeah.
like, I don't really want to revisit those
Oh
things.
my God, I feel like there's been so many. Yeah, I feel like this is an example of like a pretty harmless one, but uh, during the lot like closing times of the pandemic, or sort of nearing the end, I I feel like many of us, I just felt a bit like my footing on the ground felt like a little uneven, and I think I was in this period of being like, maybe I'll start shooting in a studio more, like maybe I should try doing that, maybe I should try doing video. I think everyone, at least for me, I felt so confined and like I wasn't able to do the things I wanted to do, that kind of lets your brain be like, maybe I'll try this. So yeah, I had set up a shoot in a studio, which I don't typically work in the studio. And it was, yeah, I brought on like a prop stylist, and I brought on a fat clothing stylist, and they brought their assistants. I paid for assistants, and then brought some like models on, and um, I just think I kind of choked or something. Like I just don't think the photos. I don't think I like did that great of a job. I don't know. So I think I was just not feeling super confident about what I was even doing or something, or I kind of had these like half thought of ideas, and um, yeah, it was just sort of feeling like I don't really know. I didn't feel super confident going into it, and I think that I felt the pressure of like I'd brought all these people here.
Right. You got to
Uh,
do it.
I got to do it, and like I don't think they're awful or like the worst photos you've ever seen. They're just kind of like forgettable, and Um,
Yeah, I
I don't
think
know.
we all
Yeah.
had those moments though, like right after COVID as like creators. We were like wanted to do something. We weren't sure what, but we're like, I can't do this thing anymore of like not working and doing the creative space, like being in a creative space that I wanted to be in. So yeah, I think you had some of those projects because it was like, gotta dust off all the camera gear and like get back into it. Cause I guess we're still here and we're still doing this thing. So I
And it
feel
felt,
I
yeah.
feel the same way though.
And it felt like some people weren't like having these problems. Like it felt like
True.
some people were like,
Which is the worst.
yeah, which is the worst. Like I was like, oh, some people are in the studio,
Just
they're
killing it.
rocking it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like seems like totally fine. I guess I should get in there. And
Yeah.
I should not have gotten in there.
I know. You look back on it too and you're like, I should have done more of this. Cause I look back on that moment when we were like, no one was doing anything. It was like a perfect time to actually like really think about your work and maybe create something different. And
Yeah,
now I look back and I'm like, damn, I did have a lot of time to do something. And I did some stuff, but maybe I could have done something differently than I did. And it's hard because you look back on it, you're like, oh, but you could do that with any moment. Like I could have done
Yeah.
better at this, or but it's interesting when you have those pause moments in creating, like which happens a lot in photography production, where it's like there's a lull sometimes, and you're like, am I doing something wrong? Do I need to go do something different? And then you do something different. You're like, maybe this was not the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, it happens. Like I
yeah,
don't love shooting in a studio either. Like we shoot sometimes in a studio, and it's like it's so nice to be in an environment. There's something about it. And some people just love being in a studio where they like change all the props and all of that. But it seems like your work is really in the moment and very environmental too. A lot of the work that I've seen on your website is very like, it has to be in a space of either like a living space or a space where there's an experience. Would you say that that's where you tend to like shoot most of your photographs?
yeah, totally. I think it's also about, I feel like in the real world, like you're reactive to the environment, and I think the studio is the opposite. You're the inventor of the entire experience, space, story, and I think at least for me, I've gotten much better at being the reactor and being like, okay, I know how to like light every single kind of room, or I know what to do. I know uh, how to kind of use the things that are available to me. And that's just sort of the muscle I've made the strongest, and enjoy working with.
Do you still shoot any film at all?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Dan does not shoot film. Dan has never shot film.
I've
So I'm
never,
trying to
yeah.
get him to shoot some
Congrats.
sort of film. Congrats. I love it. There's something about it. I don't know. Like, do you shoot a lot of film still?
I really go through phases. I actually tried to stop for like all of last year. I got like a medium format digital for my film camera,
Oh,
so
sweet.
like a
What'd you get?
digital like a phase back for
Oh,
my
sweet.
RZ67.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, like I'm done. And I'm not done. I
It's
just don't,
hard.
yeah, I really have a hard time shooting personal work digitally. I don't know what my like hang up
I'm,
is, but
You
it's
just
like
like the look of it on film?
the whole experience about
Mm.
um, waiting that time, getting the images back, scanning it, being like really precious about every single image.
and the mechanics of it too. Like when you're actually taking the shot, you like think through it. There's something
Hmm.
about it. I don't know what it is either, but I shoot a lot of personal work. My son, I shoot a lot of photography of him. He's 2, and it's just like it's a moment of okay, like he moves so quick, so it's like a moment of like pause and just like getting these moments back. Like you said, it's like it's incredible because the color too is just so good, and it
Totally.
looks usually good right out of camera. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, I think with film, most of your choices are happening before the photo is being taken. You know,
Right.
what film stock you're using, what camera you're using, all that stuff, all that stuff. But I think with digital, it's the opposite. Like you make all those choices after. Obviously, you have to make the right technical choices, but I think
Right.
all those choices of color and grain and whatever kind of come in the editing on the computer.
That's a good way to
So,
look at it. Is like you are more, maybe, I don't know if thoughtful is the right word, but you are like a little more thoughtful on your process, like the pre production with film, where you're like, you pick all the things. You're like, oh, I'm going to shoot Kodak Gold for this because that's the vibe. Or like, I really
mhm.
like Sin Still 800 for nighttime shots or whatever it is. Um, that's a good way to look at it. I've never thought of that. It's like you are picking out the look ahead of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I look at my photos now and I'm like, if I'm off a little bit or something, I'm like, oh, I can just change it. I can up the exposure in Lightroom or whatever it is. So it's like you're right. It's a you don't think about it too much when you're
It's
taking a photo
nice to
digitally.
it's nice to have that, I guess, but
Yeah.
you got to shoot film, Dan. We're gonna get you one of these episodes that I talk about film. I'm gonna convince
Then
you
I'll
to
jump
shoot.
on and be like, oh yeah.
It's
Well,
it's fun.
I don't like landscape. I don't like people. I don't like, you know what I
I
mean?
don't like people.
The only thing I would shoot would be wildlife. And, why would I shoot
Wildlife would be
film?
cool in
Wildlife. I don't
film.
know. So,
Totally.
I
Those
think
greens.
yeah, the greens. I mean, it's not. I don't know a ton of people that shoot action still with film. You can. I've seen some photographers like in F1 racing that have shot some film, which is cool.
oh,
There's
wow.
just
Mhm.
like a feeling, like when you look at it, it's pretty hard to match. You can match it, but it's pretty hard. Like the dynamic range in film is incredible. Like
Mhm.
you get all the highlights, all the shadows, the sky looks great. And the moment you didn't get to delete that. You know what I mean? And it's
Mhm.
like when you get that one picture of your friend and their eyes are closed, you don't throw it away. You keep it. And like in a camera that's digital, you kind of usually delete those. Or like, that's not a good one. We'll go to the next one. So there's something about that process too, that you only get like 24 shots, 12 shots, 36, whatever you're shooting.
Mhm.
And you think about the frame.
Yeah, I mean, I think the economic toll of film,
Yeah,
and also I think it commands something from your subject that I find interesting. I think when it's film, people will take you a bit more seriously. Sometimes shooting film gives me a little bit of confidence because somebody doesn't know how to use the camera that I am using,
true.
and I think people feel like, oh, now like suddenly a photograph becomes like an event, whereas we're so used to obviously taking pictures with our phones all the time. And I think, especially just going back to talking to strangers, like I think when I have an RZ in my hand and they see that that's something they've never seen before, they feel like, not, I don't want to say honored, but like there's some sort of exchange of like maybe respect or something that
Yeah.
they're willing to give me because I am shooting something they don't understand.
Yeah, and like you're willing to do that, and so they look at it more of like an art. So they're like, "Oh yeah, of course you can take my portrait because you look like you know what you're doing." Even though when you're
Yeah,
holding a digital camera, you should too. But I get it. They
totally.
see like thousands of people shooting photos on the street, and they're like, "Just another photo."
Yeah,
And then,
totally.
do you shoot any client work with film, or not as much anymore?
It really just depends on the project. Sometimes it's really just how I wake up that day and how I feel. Obviously a lot of it's based on deadlines. I've
True.
been feeling like proud of myself. I feel like for many years I've been sort of shooting like a couple rolls of film, and then I'll shoot digital primarily on a shoot. On the same shoot I'll shoot film and digital, and then
Yeah.
compare and try to match the images. And I feel like I've gotten my like muscles of making them pretty similar. I feel like for me the biggest differences is like sharpness. I feel like that's like a really like the digital sharpness is a difficult thing to kind of make. I feel like I'm really in my like filter era of like all right, what's the like best filter combination of things that's going to take away that sharpness, but still remain not like a look or be corny. You know, it's so easy to kind of like overdo these things. So anyway, this is really insider baseball,
I
but
like it.
yeah.
But when you take a photo for film, do you scan it in digitally, or is that you don't correct it at all? Like that's the final image.
No, I have like an Imicon scanner, so
Okay,
I scan it and then I color correct and like dust and
gotcha.
then I'll kind of match the digitals to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you shooting mostly medium format for your projects? Because you're shooting phase one.
Yeah, yeah, either 645 or 67. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like for me 35 millimeter is like what's the point or something.
Yeah. Do you just like the larger image?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The phase ones are nice too. I love the Hasselblad. I shot some studio stuff on a Hasselblad medium format digital and it was fun.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like with the like bellows with the RC and the phase kind of create this that it kind of does that like softness thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The digital back to the film camera is cool. I've never done that, but you get it's probably really nice with the glass too, because you're shooting
Hmm.
like film lens glass. And like I've done that with some video stuff, like shooting old Leica lenses on
Yeah.
like a nice digital camera. And you get that really soft fall off on the sides, which is really nice. And it's funny how we like that more now. Like we want to
Yeah.
take the digital out of it. Like everybody was like so down for like 4K, 8K, 12K. And now we're like, take the edge off of that because we don't need to see through the walls or whatever. Like there's just so much sharpness now. Like when you look at like all the screens at a Best Buy or something, it's like how sharp can your TV get?
Yeah, totally.
And we often find ourselves now going back to like all this vintage stuff. Is there anything else that you find in the vintage world that you like? Like are you really into like anything else like record players or like is there any sort of nostalgia that you go back to that's vintage?
Ooh. I don't think so. I think this is my only vice, my vintage vice. Maybe vintage clothes. I guess
That's cool.
that's something I'm interested
Yeah.
in.
I mean,
But
that's kind of coming back too, is like all the clothes that were once in are now back in. And also like thrift shopping is cool because it's like something that not everybody can
Thrift
go
shopping's
buy.
huge now.
Yeah. Cause it's like one off things or it's something that's way harder to get now too. And so like it
mm,
has its own unique style.
totally, totally.
I've got
Yeah. Go ahead.
I've gotten really into watching people mix vinyl, like
Hmm.
vinyl to vinyl online. And it's just so
Hmm.
interesting to look at that. There's no digital mixer, it's all just vinyl to vinyl. And it's not as like crazy smooth as like your digital DJ, but it's cool to watch the process because it's like methodical and like it slows everything down. I think we go too fast right now. I think
Hmm.
slowing down is really cool to watch other people get back into.
Totally.
Yeah, I think
Sean does a lot of clubbing.
I don't do a lot of clubbing. Dan likes to
I
just
do a
make
lot of
fun of
clubbing.
me. You do?
Yeah.
In Brooklyn or like in New York?
Yeah, yeah, New York. And yeah,
Like
I feel
like
like
house
in
music stuff?
yeah, house music, techno.
Sweet. I like that.
Yeah.
I went to
Yeah.
this one crazy place in Barcelona and they had like house music and the DJ had like fire coming up next to him.
Oh my gosh.
It was fun. It was outside. I like that stuff. Dan has
Cool.
he has a restaurant where he has a DJ come in and I got to
So we'll start
DJ
playing some
I
techno
got to
next
DJ
time.
there once. I wasn't
Amazing.
supposed to be, but I just stepped up and grabbed the
That was a
turntables
fun
and
night.
yeah, it was fun. I
Where's
love
your
music.
restaurant?
It's in New Hampshire,
Oh,
New
cool.
Hampshire. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a cool sushi spot. Um,
Cool.
yeah, it's the music thing for me too is like I used to, and I don't know if it's because of photography and like creating, but I love how things are made. And I think watching how music is made is also like influenced some of the way that I create. Do you have any sort of outside influences like music or whether it's style or fashion, is there something that influences the way you think about your work?
Mm,
It could be anything too. Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, everything. I think, mm,
there's got to be something specific where you're like, I love, even if it's somebody else's work, like, is there a photographer or a style you just like, or something you're into currently?
I mean, of course, like movies and painting and books and all of those things are influential. I think for me, being in the real world and trying to look for things that surprise me. I'm just like everyone else. Like I walk around the city and I'm like on my phone and stressed about responding to something. But I feel like the days where I can be open to looking, the way that yesterday I saw like somebody's blinds were broken and they were using two shoes to keep their blinds up and the shoes are like perfectly bent, and it's like things like that I think are uh, inspirational in a way that I find like most exciting. It's just like the ways in which humans chose to do something, or maybe they built something, or just like this human interaction that maybe they created a little like scene in their garden and I'm like, actually that's amazing that I have like a balcony, I don't have like anything on it. It's cool that you created this little fairy garden for all the people to walk by and see this like beautiful human gift that they're giving like a passerby.
Yeah.
I think that's something that feels like really inspiring.
Yeah, it's like seeing inside of the way people think too. You get this like notion of people without people. I did a
Yeah.
project a long time ago in college where we had to go out and like photograph things that showed people were there. And that's what that
Mm.
reminds me of, like people setting up their blinds a different way. Like this morning I saw like cigarettes on the ground in like a big construction building, like things like that where you're like, somebody was here doing the thing, like building, and they had these moments here. Like what were they thinking about? And it's cool to see all these moments of people living their lives. And I think a lot of that in the city is great. Like you just get so much of that.
Yeah.
Is there any place you like to go besides the city for like inspiration or like photography? I know Ohio was one of the spots because you grew up there.
I was just about to say, just in response, I think that sometimes the beauty of vacation is just turning your job is to notice stuff,
Hmm.
and you are hopefully not, responding to emails or whatever when you're on vacation. And I think I always find myself walking around wherever I'm, going for like leisure, and I'm just like, yeah, I find myself being like, oh, look at that. Oh, that's funny. Look at that. I think that there's uh, trying to kind of do that for yourself wherever you live, of being like, actually, my job right now is just to notice funny things. Might be like the most helpful thing for me. But anyway, back to your question. I really am loving like Wellfleet in Cape Cod. I feel
Oh,
like
cool.
it's like an important place for me right now. I've had a few friends that have like cabins or have like stayed there in various capacities, and um, like I think swimming is like a really important part of my identity in some way.
And why is
I,
that? Why do you think that is?
I mean, I grew up swimming from like age like 4 to 18 kind of competitively, and so it was like a huge part of my childhood and formative years. But for some reason, I gotta get in some water all the time. And I'm usually like first one in. And even like I've started getting into cold water swimming and
Oh, I love that.
putting like the wetsuit on and all that stuff. So anyway, Wellfleet has all these like kettle ponds that are like these like beautiful clear sandy bottom ponds, freshwater ponds. that, yeah, there's, I don't know, such a special place.
Yeah, I'm always the first one in the water too. I love to like swim in the ocean in the winter. And like Dan and I
Yeah.
did a
Yep.
hunting documentary that comes out this year, and we went in the mountains of Colorado. We found this pond that was like 10,000 feet up, and we camped next to it, and it was
Oh,
freezing,
so
but like
cool.
swam in it. I'm like, I have to swim in it. Like anytime I see water, like
Yeah.
I go on a hike, I'm like, I got to swim somewhere. Like there's a stream, I'm just going to like lay down in it. There's something
Totally.
about
Yeah.
it, like
Something about it.
experiencing like spring water or like cold water too, like kind of changes the way you think. I think that's why everybody's into like cold plunge.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
It's
Yeah.
like drinking a bunch of coffee really quick. That's
Yeah,
how I look at
totally.
it.
Yeah, it's such a confidence booster. I feel like it always makes me feel like so good.
Yeah. What are you most excited about this year or coming up? Is there anything specific? Are you excited about like a certain trip you're going on? Is there a project you're working on? Like, what's really exciting to you currently?
Yeah, I have been, yeah, so I put out a book, I guess like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it was all about sex and fear and desire and the way those things kind of intertwine. And so, yeah, I'd never like put out a book before. And I think it's my first time putting out a book, but also my first time being done with something and being like, okay, like what do I do now? There's like a certain, not emptiness, but I think a certain feeling like of unease in that moment of like this is over and now what's kind of next. So I feel like I've started to maybe spent like a year in that feeling of like, okay, that's over. Like what's next? So I have found myself again kind of thinking about all the things we started this conversation talking about in regards to uh, what am I like uncomfortable by? What do I fear? What am I interested in? And so I found myself thinking a lot about porn and the way that porn kind of plays in our life and the way our like individual relationships feel very taboo, but also um, commonplace. And so I'm still in sort of the early days, but I've started photographing people that performers in the porn world, and I photographed about I guess like 12 people so far. So yeah, it's just been exciting to work on something so new, and also my last book was very personal. It was like
Mm.
there's a lot of pictures of me, a lot of pictures of like friends, boyfriends, strangers, and it feels exciting to work on something that's not. It is super personal in the ways that I care about it, but it's not personal in like my own experience way. So yeah, it feels kind of like graduation of kind of myself as an artist, maybe. Like what do I, I think it's common for people's like first projects to be this like very deeply personal kind of thing, and then maybe they start to divorce themselves from that deeply personal part to kind of continue on. Um, because my life is just it's pretty good and like stable now. Like when I was making that work in my 20s, like it wasn't those things. So I think yeah, trying to figure out like what do I still care about while and I still care about all those same themes I cared about before, but kind of finding those things like in the real world.
Do you think that changes the way you create too? Like when you were younger, you were just like, let's go, let's like take photographs and just there is no path. And now it's like you feel you have to be a little more on a structured path, or do you feel like you lost some of that like exploration and you're trying to get back into it?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think that as someone who has to make money,
Yeah.
it's like such an insane mind game to play all the time. And um, I think in my earlier 20s, like I was much more comfortable like not having any money. So it was like, oh, of course I'll go to Montana for a week, even though I have
Yeah.
like $700 in my bank account or whatever. And of course I'll like shoot all film and like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. And now I'm like, well, I got to put this much money into my like retirement this
I
year.
know.
Wouldn't that be
Like,
great if we could get back to that?
yeah, but it's like,
Those days.
yeah, so just trying to remind myself that like $700 Caroline like made it work, and
Right.
like Caroline now can make it work and money wise. And I think
Yeah.
so then it's like, yeah, I think the intentionality of I used to just kind of react to the world. Like I used to go to California and be like, oh my God, the ocean.
Yeah.
And now I go and I'm like, yeah, I've been here a bunch of times.
I know. We care too much now. And I think when you get older, you care about things because you have to like pay your bills and like you're thinking about your future. And like Dan and I talked about this a little bit. Like when you're younger, you just like, I don't know, we're going to figure it out. And then we
Just live.
lose some of that edge. And I don't know, like, it's hard to get back into it because you like have all these fears, like going back into fear of like, well, I need to save. I need to make sure I have enough for rent or whatever, the mortgage and this and that. And you wish you could get back to that space, which I think we all can. We just have to find a way to like balance that. And it's tough because I liked that. Like I was creating way more when I was younger because I was like, whatever, just gonna do this. People don't like it, I don't care. And now you're like, has to be formatted a certain way. People have to see it like this now in a gallery. It can't be just like thrown up online. Do you think that your process in this new book or this new project that you're working on inside porn is that a way to get back to the first book and maybe some exploration? Is it a path to keep exploring where you're going with your work? Like, what do you think it is that drew you towards that coming from the book on sexuality?
Yeah, I feel like this year I just have really made it a priority of mine to live in abundance with work, not think that every job, saying no to a job is like the last job I'll ever get asked to do, and kind of step into that like fear and faith of like something will come, something good will come, like, and just yeah, dedicate more of my time to making my own work and doing it however I want to do it. And um, even with like film or something, I feel like I was like, I shouldn't have to shoot film. I should be able to do it however I want, and just
Right.
kind of being like, maybe I just want to, and that's fine. Like
Yeah.
maybe I should color darkroom print, or maybe I should just spend a week in this place, like because I used to do that and not have all the answers for it. And I think I used to just feel like, oh, if I get asked to do a job and I don't have another job that day, I should say yes. And I've really tried to change my perspective of like, well, just because I'm not working doesn't mean I don't have my own, like, I am also my client. And I
Right.
feel like that's like so hard for me to legitimize myself as, yeah, I can always come last in terms of like those scans to edit or whatever. So trying really hard to be like, no, 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 those scans are just as important as doing some whatever job that you might not even show anybody, might not even be valuable or time important. So yeah, I just feel like I'm in this like reprioritization of like what's important. And I'm trying to like get more money for things for less work. I do
Yeah.
like, I think we all are. So I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna get more money, like I need to spend that time doing my own thing, and that's what's going to lead to more work anyway. So
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the more that you put into your personal stuff, the more that you'll attract new work. It just seems to happen. Like we think you have to say yes to everything. In reality, you have to say yes to that one great thing and no to 1,000 things, like, because you can't just keep taking on all these things. I mean, I'm guilty for it too. Like, you don't know when the work's going to go away. So you're like, yep, we'll do that. Yep, we'll do that. And at times it's probably better to be like, we can't, we're not available. I'm not available, even if you are, because you need that time to create yourself.
Yeah, totally.
And one of the other cool things that I noticed is you're rep by giant artists.
Hmm.
That's so cool, because I way back wanted to, like, when I was in my photography career, I wanted to be a part of that group, because I always
Oh.
looked towards their stuff. And so that's super cool to see that you've made it to that spot. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't had an agent before, and I signed with them in like December, January. So,
cool. So it's
um,
new.
yeah, it's super new. Yeah.
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 Yeah. They have some awesome stuff on there. I love looking at their website, and they are very methodical with who they pick. So they obviously like knew they wanted to represent you for a reason. And that's just cool to like be at that point in your career.
Yeah, and I had like talked to them like a couple years before they signed me. So I feel like that agent process is like such a strange one that I don't know. But yeah, so it feels like it's a long, it can either be really quick or it can be like multiple years where they're kind of keeping their eyes on you, and I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're like looking at a bunch of different photographers. They're like, okay, which path do we want to go? How are they developing their book, their work? And they start to see the path that you go down. They're like, this is great. This is somebody that we want to represent. We want to be a part of their journey. So that's just cool to see that somebody else believes in like what you're doing too.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's the pod. Thank you for coming on.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.